We've had 20 COPs, and what have we done to address climate change? Greenhouse gas levels are rising faster than ever. The extreme weather events are taking off. There's feedbacks putting more CO2 in. We're an innovative, intelligent species, but we're total idiots on the climate change issue. I look at the overall climate system, all the different components and how they interact and change. So the rapidly declining sea ice and snow cover over the land in the Arctic. As that declines, the Arctic gets darker, and because it's darker, it absorbs more solar energy, so it heats up a lot more than the rest of the planet. That change in the heat balance between the equator and the Arctic affects the jet streams, makes them wavier, causes extreme weather events. Alaska's been warming much faster than the global average, so it's drying out, and there's a lot of permafrost there. So we're getting these massive fires. We have over 300 fires going on in Alaska right now. As the Arctic warms, there's a big potential risk of methane coming up in large quantities, which would then kick the climate into a much warmer temperatures. The models are under-predicting big time the actual observed measurements of what is actually happening. For example, in Arctic sea ice decline, the models are showing that the sea ice may be gone the end of the melt season in 2040 or 2050, something like that. And if you look at the data, you know, the volume of sea ice dropping down, if you follow that trend, it's likely that there'll be no sea ice before the end of this decade. You know, that 2-degree limit is kind of a number that has been out there for a long time, but it's not really a scientifically derived number. Now, there are lots of people like James Hansen and other climatologists that are now saying 1.5 degrees is the highest limit we can go, but even 1.5 degrees is almost double what we have today. Since about 1750 or so, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, since that time frame, we've had about 0.85 degrees Celsius of warming. 0.6 of that 0.8 or so is in the last 30 odd years. So the pace of warming has rapidly picked up. All of these things are happening with 0.8 degrees. So to tell me that you know, we can take 2.5 times that warming, I don't know how that's possible. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. Look at the definition of emergency, and we're meeting all of these criteria. I mean, we're in a lot of we're in a lot of trouble here. We're breaking temperature records around the world. I mean, Europe's in another massive heat wave. Large parts of Europe, you know, Spain, France, the UK. You know, we had a massive heat wave there in 2003 that killed 80,000 odd people. We had a massive heat wave in Russia, which wiped out 40% of their grain crop in 2010, and that caused food prices to spike, which can be related to the Arab Spring. Like, how much more do we need to know? We know enough, but we need to put far more. We need to treat this as something that can take out civilization. We need to treat this as the threat, and then deal with it using our technology, using our innovation, using our resources. If the public and if the politicians actually realized the extent of the changes that are happening, I think they'd be quite terrified. The changes that are happening are extremely rapid. You know, I would call them abrupt. I would say abrupt climate change is underway. We're just at the early beginnings of very massive changes, and we're already seeing a large increase in the frequency, severity, and duration of extreme weather events. For example, torrential rain events causing flooding, droughts, for example, such as the California drought, the South American drought. Many parts of the world are undergoing extreme precipitation regimes, either droughts or flooding. people expect that California, you know, it's a long drought, but eventually it will end. Well, it may not. Okay, it may not end. It may go on for years, for decades. We may have mass migrations of people out of California. If you go to the northern Pacific, the water is extremely warm. You know, vast regions of the ocean are 4 or 5 degrees Celsius warmer than normal. It's causing lots of marine life kills off the west coast of North America. I mean, scientists are logical people, right? They do all the studies, but I have to complain that I don't understand, I cannot fathom why the scientific community isn't far more vocal about the risks and the threats that we face. Continuing what we're doing, we'll have severe global food shortages by 2040, for example. And, you know, huge water issues, huge water shortages in large parts of the world. I mean, we can already see, like the climate system has destabilized. We're going into very unknown territory. I think we're in trouble now, you know, as we double what we have now, as we triple it, it's going to get a lot worse. I mean, we're the tip of the iceberg in terms of these extreme weather events. How do you adapt to, you know, a rapid rise in sea level that floods out your city, right? You have to move to a different city. Like, you can only adapt so much. We have to go full speed ahead with mitigation. You know, we have to slash fossil fuel emissions, not by 2100, which the G7 just talked about, not by 2050. You know, we have to treat the climate mayhem that is occurring as a global emergency that threatens our actual existence on this planet. We have the technology to go to a renewable, pretty much a renewable society. The prices of solar and wind and all of these things are plummeting as we hit the economies of scale that we're reaching. And the growth rates are enormous, but we could ramp those up much faster. We need to go full speed ahead at getting off fossil fuels, which is hard to do. It's hard for people to fathom because it's the status quo, but I think there'll be a tipping point in human behavior very soon. You know, the world will wake up one morning and there'll be no sea ice in the Arctic. And it'll be a completely different, like the weather will be unrecognizable. And maybe, you know, will that wake people up? I mean, like, do we have to reach that point? I mean, we worry about the risks of ISIS or terror and spend billions of dollars on addressing this, and yet climate change, which affects everybody, and it's taking out crops, and you know, it's having huge impacts around the world. You know, it's just I have trouble getting my head around why this is still happening. I don't think we want an ice-free Arctic. I think we need to try to cool the Arctic to restore some stability to the jet streams and the weather patterns and keep the methane in place. The notion that we have a lot of time to deal with these issues is completely incorrect. What are we doing to our planet? Like, it's totally, I mean, our whole political system is, you know, the money and the power structures are just not wanting to recognize the reality of what's happening. So I would hope that we'll reach a point where that would change, and that's this tipping point in human behavior. But we can't wait forever. We can't wait, in fact, we can't wait a decade. We can't wait, we have no time, we've used up the time. We have to act as soon as possible, as soon as we can, and pull out all the stops, because society is going to completely change.